should be back now. Hopefully it's back now. Give it a moment. Come on. You were working fine. Okay. Now we're connected. Now we should be good. Boy, sorry about that. It's very hard to predict when it's working fine all day and you don't expect anything to go wrong because it's been very stable until you go live and it's like, oh, wait, I can't do that. All right, it's back. And I just finished today's tech video, so you can stay tuned for that after the stream. Aliens are stealing my bandwidth, dang it. I wonder if it had something. It seemed to clear up a lot after I finished exporting. I know that doesn't make sense, but why would it clear up as soon as the export finished? I guess that's might just be pure coincidence. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining the stream. 31 Flavors asked, what's the difference between channel points and bits? So bits are actually money. 1 bit equals 1 penny. So 100 bits is $1. 1,000 bits is $10. 10,000 bits is $100, I think. Yeah, the aliens should be gone now, but channel points, I don't even fully understand. Basically, they just give you channel points for watching streamers, and then you can redeem those points on things that streamers may set up. I don't have anything set up for you to take advantage of channel points because I can't really think of it. It's basically just Twitch's reward of here, have this because you watched a lot of Twitch. When you use your service a lot, you get channel points, and you can use those on emotes or something, but I don't have those set up, so sorry. I don't. bits are what I care about because those are actually currency. It's just Twitch's currency. It's like it holds value in itself. But yeah, to actually get to the title, we have some bad news for the iPad Pro with mini-LED, which has been rumored for over a year now. I remember people talking about the mini-LED iPad Pro back before the iPad Pro launched last year, which was funny. There were so many people, I remember just saying, like, don't get the 2020 iPad Pro. There's a mini LED one coming later this year. They're going to do 2 iPad Pros in 2020. Here we are mid-April. It's still not out, but Bloomberg reported on it today saying that they're actually running into manufacturing issues where they have somewhat low yield rates, and that doesn't even take into consideration the Digitimes report that was claiming a chip, what's the term? Lack of chip production. Chip production is, there's a chip shortage. That's what I was thinking of. A microchip shortage is affecting lots of different companies and countries. I believe ours just said that it's becoming a national emergency by the lack of microchips. It's affecting car companies, tech companies, and Digitimes is claiming that both MacBook Pros and iPad Pros are being affected by this microchip shortage. So now, on top of microchip shortages, there could be mini LED production issues, though Bloomberg is saying they still expect Apple to launch this iPad Pro this month. I just have to wonder when, because I've been saying for a while I was expecting site refreshes, although today would have been one potential date. Apple has done site refreshes on Mondays pretty regularly. Most site refreshes are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. There's hardly any ever product drops on Thursday through Sunday. So I'll be keeping my eyes open over the next couple days. It could launch as soon as tomorrow. That would be hilarious. Maybe this report's inaccurate, or Apple could pull a... what did they do last year? They had the Magic Keyboard case, and they unveiled it. They unveiled it in March, but said shipping wouldn't be until May, and then it ended up actually being ahead of schedule, and it delivered in end of April, right before May, which was a little bit weird. So I guess because of production issues, they weren't entirely sure if they could ship it by April, so they gave themselves a bit of a buffer and said shipping this May. So they could do something similar with the mini LED iPad Pro, which Bloomberg still is saying. I know a lot of you guys disagree, but there is still Bloomberg reporting that mini LED will only be on the 12.9-inch variant. And there's so many people saying, like, no, Apple never does that. They never do a display upgrade just for this big one. In a way, they do. You know, they gave OLED to the bigger iPhone, but they didn't. At least initially for the smaller one, they gave it, the mid-range one, they gave it LCD. So yeah, it's kind of all over the place. Would you upgrade to this iPad if it is just a better screen? No, I still plan on buying one to review though. But yeah, I've probably gone over it a million times. I basically I need a legitimate reason to upgrade. It's not that the mini LED iPad Pro sounds bad. It honestly sounds like one of the best tablets you could buy ever, between iPad OS being amazing and the fact that you can turn it into a laptop with the keyboard case, and the Apple Pencil's amazing. 120 hertz is awesome. I love Face ID. The thing is, everything I love about the iPad Pro I still have right here. So it's very, very difficult to justify getting rid of this and upgrading. I was actually talking to my wife about potentially selling this. I'm not going to sell it online, so don't make an offer for me. But I just don't like dealing with shipping stuff. I would sell it to someone in my personal life or just someone nearby. But a friend of mine recently was in the market for an iPad Pro, and I almost got him to buy this, but he decided to go new, I guess. But it's not, I'm not in a rush to sell it, because if I sold it right now, it's possible that I would have to wait several months without an iPad at all, and I don't want to do that. So because he needed an iPad Pro like today, I didn't provide too low an offer. But if the new iPad Pro came out and I had already ordered it and I already had it and I was reviewing it, in that case, I'd be probably willing to sell the iPad Pro for a bit less, because I would just look at it as a way to offset the cost of this new iPad Pro. So if I could get a good deal on this one, I would be more inclined to keep it. But something like Final Cut, yeah, that would be a huge difference. Or the A14X chip does something else entirely. Final Cut would be the main one. External monitor support that's been revamped. Like they give the iPad Pro Thunderbolts, and the old ones don't have Thunderbolt. It's like now you can do all this cool monitor stuff with the iPad you couldn't before. If there was some type of software exclusive that was enabled through the A14X chip, I would be much more inclined to upgrade. But if it's literally just the display is better and the A14X chip is faster, but it's all the same software features as the last iPad Pro, that would make me like, yeah, that's kind of hard to justify. I'd love to try it, though, because like I've talked about before, when I first got the 2017 iPad Pro, which my wife uses now, she still has it, that was the first iPad I used that had 120 hertz. And I had never really extensively used a 120 hertz display before. But as soon as I turned that thing on and started scrolling and typing and started seeing the motion, I fell in love with that refresh rate, and now I want it on everything. And I still think it's a gorgeous display, and I love having it on this iPad Pro. So maybe that'll be mini LED for me. Maybe I'll look at mini LED and be like, oh my God, the colors are so vibrant. It looks so rich. It's so detailed. It looks amazing. Maybe I'll just fall in love with mini LED, but I need to see it. I've established that myself. I need to look at it in person to formulate whether or not I can live without it, or I can't live without it. I cannot move on with LCD. It's so disgusting. Yeah, I don't think that'll happen. Chris Norton donated 100 bits. Thank you. Says, are you changing your work schedule? Yeah, I normally don't stream on Mondays, but this is not going to be a normal recurring thing. The weird thing that's happening right now, this is a little off tech subject, but my wife and I both work from home. She's working in the other room, and they are doing really, really weird schedules at her job because I guess they're understaffed or they don't have enough people working there. So they have her on really weird schedules, and I basically work whenever my wife is working. That way we can both have, when she gets time off, I have time off, and then when she's working, I'm working. So that way we can line up our schedules best we can. So she's working today, but she didn't work yesterday, but then she also has tomorrow off. So I'm working today and I'm posting videos today, but I don't plan on working and doing much tomorrow. So it's kind of an off schedule right now. It's a little bit weird. We're switching Tuesday and Monday just for this week, and then probably next week we'll go back to normal. Monday off, Tuesday on. Tuesday through Saturday working, Sunday, Monday off. Right now it's Saturday on, Sunday off, Monday on, Tuesday off, which is very confusing. But yeah, that's why I'm streaming on Monday. Let's see. Too Rich for My Blood will be living with the 2020 iPad Air lifestyle for quite some time. That's fine. If you've already got a 2020 iPad Air, I don't think you need to upgrade for years. Probably you could probably hold on to that iPad for easily 4 to 5 years, probably 6. Back in 2016, the 9.7-inch iPad Pro had many benefits over the 12.9-inch. The 9.7-inch had True Tone, 12.9-inch didn't. 9.7-inch had a 12-megapixel camera. The 12.9 was stuck with an 8. That's true. I know what you're saying. I believe it also had a flash, right? Didn't they in March? I remember that event. It was a very boring event, but yeah, they announced a 9.7-inch version of the iPad Pro, and it had a flash sensor by the camera, whereas the 12.9-inch didn't. And the only reason I would say that's a bit different, though, is that it was released at a different time. So the 9.7-inch iPad Pro came out in March, but the first iPad Pro that came out in 2015 with the 12.9-inch display, I believe that one came out in like October or November or something like that. They came out at different times, so having different features makes sense, whereas I'm not sure if any of the reports are claiming that the mini LED iPad Pro will be the only iPad that gets refreshed, or if the 11-inch iPad Pro will also get refreshed, but just not get mini LED. I would almost expect it to not get refreshed. That would almost make more sense if they were just like, yeah, the 11-inch iPad Pro still has the A12Z chip, it still has LCD, and it doesn't have 5G modems, but the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, that gets mini LED, that gets 5G, and that gets the A14X chip. Kind of weird, because then you're like, well, when do they refresh the 11-inch? Or do they refresh the 11-inch just with the CPU and the 5G, but not the screen? I don't know. Still kind of weird, but you don't need a new iPad because you're getting the new MacBook Pro and iMac. You should keep that iPad. I don't know, Gustavo, who told you I was getting the new MacBook Pro? I'm not planning on getting the new MacBook Pro. Are you confusing me with Nick? Because Nick and Randy are both really, really sold on these upcoming MacBook Pros that are going to have Apple Silicon and legacy ports and mini LED. They're really excited for those, but I've, on the record, multiple times stated that after reviewing the MacBook Air, I realized I do not need a laptop. If the iMacs are too expensive and they're not to my liking, and if Apple decides to make the iMacs, $8,000 to $10,000, then in that case I would get a MacBook Pro instead of an iMac. But then I would kind of treat the MacBook Pro like a tower. I would kind of put it in a dock mode and leave it folded up and just kind of utilize the ports and take it with me on trips and stuff. But at my desk, it would basically just stay plugged in or something. Yeah, I don't think I don't plan on getting a MacBook Pro and an iMac. I don't need multiple laptops. This is the only laptop I want. I want like a desktop for doing all my work related stuff, and then everything else with this or a better version of this. Also, another red flag for me, if the new iPad Pro doesn't work with this keyboard case, that's a hard no, because that would instantly jump the price up to like, oh, now I got to buy a new iPad Pro and I got to buy another keyboard case for another $350. That would be a flat out like, nope, ain't going to happen. But I don't think it will. I'd be very surprised if they decided the keyboard case doesn't work anymore and you got to buy a new one. That would shock me. Cooperbomb 112004, thank you for the Twitch Prime for 19 months. That's a while. Jeez. I have a 2017 iPad Pro. I'm probably going to get a Surface in a year, so I'm upgrading iPad doesn't make sense. Yeah, I guess it doesn't if you're going to buy that hunk of trash. No, just keep your 2017 iPad Pro forever. Even if Final Cut, yeah, because there's not a ton of situations where I need to edit in Final Cut on the go, but I would definitely like the option to on trips and vacations and stuff. But if it turns into, right now I'm on the fence about a $1,000 upgrade. If they say, oh, by the way, you need a new smart keyboard, now it becomes like a $1,400 upgrade. So if you add $400, if you add $400 to that purchase, it instantly to me is like, oh, it's already not worth it. 1,000, I'm like, maybe 1,000, but if you're adding for it, no way. Mike is saying, what are you calling a hunk of trash? I'm calling that hunk of trash with your keyboard cover that's falling apart. You know what I'm talking about, Mike. Your keyboard cover's like shred to scraps. Looks like a cat went at that thing. You know what Surface keyboard cover I'm talking about. Hunk of baloney. I don't care how nice the microphone is. Luma Fusion will still be better than Final Cut for iOS because of the Mac? What? That doesn't make sense. I don't think it'll be better than Final Cut. Luma Fusion's good, but I think the idea with Final Cut would be it would have all the features that the Mac has. Let's see. Drew would be sad. Yes, I would be very sad. I just listened to the Talks podcast and I found the solution to the Mars problem, Neuralink. The Mars problem will be a lot closer than Neuralink. Neuralink is deep future tech. It's in development. I don't know if you guys saw the monkey playing Mind Pong. That's amazing, but getting to the point of figuring out how to change perception of time is a lot further away. Neuralink is going to be interesting in a few decades. People are potentially going to Mars this decade, so you're going to have to figure that out a lot sooner. I throw my keyboard cover at you, sir. Go for it. The 24-inch iMac is rumored to be aimed at regular consumers, so I wouldn't be surprised to see it stay at the current $1,300 price point. The 27-inch iMac currently starts at $1,800. I wouldn't be surprised to see that go up to $2,000 or $2,200, but I don't think they're going to crank the price up to $8,000. I don't see them going to $8,000, but I'd be very surprised if it stays at $1,300. I agree they're targeting it at average consumers, but this is Apple we're talking about still. Also, you got to keep in mind Apple Silicon. They're going to be using state-of-the-art SSDs. This is a bigger display. It's going to be a thin panel. It's going to look very beautiful. And making beautiful all-in-one designs has never been cheap. The only reason the iMac currently starts at $1,300 is because that model is still a 1080p screen, and it still has a Fusion drive, spinning disks. And they've been manufacturing that exact model for like basically a decade now. This is a new design. So new tooling, new manufacturing lines, that doesn't start off at $1,300, especially if it's all SSD and it's a 4K display. No way. Personally, I'd be very shocked if it stayed at the $1,300. I'm anticipating a price jump. I don't think it'll be an unreasonable one, but I think that the 24-inch iMac will start around $2,000. I know it's high, but I'm just saying the performance on it is going to be unmatched for the price, so they can justify it. We're looking at different things here. Let me look. I'm going to the Mac section right now because I know they still sell that 1080p one. Let me look. 21.5-inch. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. It's an $1,100 one, but it's a 256 gig SSD, 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports. The 4K one starts at $1,300 still. I still stand by my point with the design being so old. They can afford to price it low when its design is that old. And it's unupdated. Just the manufacturing lines changing the tooling and using thinner display panels and having to redesign that whole chin, the speaker system, the cooling architecture. There's so many things that have to be changed. I still see it just from the fact that it's going to look so much better. It looks so much different. I think the 24-inch iMac will be $2,000 and the 32-inch iMac will be $3,000 starting. But the performance is going to be insanely good. It'll be way better than any of the current iMacs, and it'll be a good value iMac, but I don't see it being cheaper. Because Apple knows that desktops aren't really for average consumers anyway these days. They're going to tell most average consumers to get a laptop and say, M1 is good enough for you. But if you want something faster and stronger, I don't see them. An SSD is 256 gig. Yeah, it's like a tiny SSD. I really hope they don't keep that around. 8 gigabytes of RAM with an i3 processor. That's a $1,300 iMac with a quad-core i3. Ugh. Yeah, I'd be very shocked if it stays at 13. Maybe under 2. I'd say if we're lucky, it's under 2,000. But I don't mean to toot my own horn. I don't mean to brag a little bit, but I've gotten pretty good with the price predictions in most recent history. No one thought I was going to be right about the Magic Keyboard case. So I was the only one saying that's going to be like a $300 purchase to get a keyboard case with a trackpad built in. And everyone was like, no, Drew, come on. The folio covers are only $2,000. Adding a little trackpad isn't that hard. It'll probably be like $200, $250. And I was like, no, $300, probably more. And that ended up being pretty spot on. HomePod Mini, I was also estimating to be around $100. And I've gotten pretty accurate with the MagSafe Duo. That was the other one. Everyone was telling me MagSafe Duo was going to be $80. I remember that. All over Twitter, people were like, that's going to be, $60 to $80. It's just a MagSafe puck and an Apple Watch charge puck put together. Why is that so complicated? And I was like, no. There's a crease. It folds. Instantly adds cost and instantly adds value. And the fact that it's going to be all Appleified and the $80 charging dock just for the Apple Watch that doesn't come with a charge brick. And it ended up costing $100 I think I was predicting 150, and then it ended up launching for 130 without the charge brick. So if you need the charge brick to go with it, it ends up being around 150. So I'm just saying the prices with Apple always end up being a bit more than everyone thinks. Think AirPods Max. That's your example. Even with Apple Silicon, I think. I believe that if they make all of the Macs way too cheap, they're not going to be as profitable as they used to be. They still need people shelling out a certain amount of money. Intel or not, they still need to justify different price tiers between the Macs of like, okay, here's the reason to go with a MacBook, here's the reason to go with an iMac, here's the benefits, here's the drawbacks. And I do believe the iMacs will still be like a better performance, but more expensive. And I don't think it might eventually get to 1,300 again, but it took a few years, I believe, before the 4K iMac got down to that $1,300 price. Original iPad was way cheaper than everyone predicted. I thought most people were pretty spot on with that. I remember a lot of people saying 500. Let's see. You have Tim the idea to charge more for the Magic Keyboard. I gave Tim the idea. Yes. The reason the Magic Keyboard is so expensive is purely Talos of Tech. That was all me. I thought MagSafe Duo was going to be like $200, so I was pleasantly surprised with that one. Yeah, that's kind of a nice thing about assuming it's expensive. There's not a lot of drawbacks to me assuming the iMac is going to be more expensive. If I end up being wrong and it ends up being cheaper, that's great. That's a wonderful thing. But if we all go into it assuming they're going to be the same price and then they're not, you're kind of setting yourself up for disappointment, which is why I would lean on the idea of assume it's going to be more, especially with Apple, guys. In general, it's probably safe to assume a product that's going to come out is going to be more expensive. There's not really a lot of drawbacks to assuming something is going to cost more. But with Apple in particular, you really, really should expect products that aren't announced yet are going to be more expensive than you think, or more pricey than less pricey. There's a lot of potential setup for disappointment if you keep going into everything assuming, oh, I bet it won't be that bad. Oh, I bet it'll still be pretty affordable. You're setting yourself up for disaster, because all of those people who are imagining things that way would never have guessed AirPods Max pricing. Even I couldn't have guessed AirPods Max were going to be $550. I was thinking 400 to 500 was going to be pretty expensive, and they went 50 past that. And I was like, oh my God. Even I couldn't predict they would be that stupid. I was expecting premium over-ear headphones are around 300 to 350, right? That's like the Bose and the Sony department. I think even the Sonys you can get for sub 300 now. But I was expecting 3 to 350. That's kind of the premium over-ear market. So if Apple entered the premium over-ear market with the Apple tax, that would be more like 350, 400, maybe closer to 500. And then it ended up being 550. And I was like, it was crazy. Okay. Remember when everyone was saying that if Apple went from a 15-inch to a 16-inch MacBook Pro, it'd start at $3,000? I don't remember everyone saying that. And it actually started at the same price of the old 15-inch. That's what I'm expecting here. Matthew, what you're forgetting is that the original 15-inch MacBook Pro was $2,000, and then they did site refreshes later and got rid of the $2,000 model and now just have $2,400. So $2,400 is now the starting price that we've all gotten used to. But the 15-inch MacBook Pro I bought back in 2016, that one was $2,000, and then it went up. So I don't remember everybody saying it was going to be $3,000. I remember speculating that it could be $3,000, but the value would be better. The storage would be great. The standard RAM would be a lot higher. But that's, I speculate on all kinds of wild things they could do. I'm not a leaker, so I would compare it. I don't consider the iMac going from 21.5-inch with chin and thick bezels to 24-inch with iPad style bezels that are thin, and the design has been flattened on the back, and the edge is more pronounced, and it's still 16:9. Like, there's so much redesign going on between 15-inch MacBook Pro to 16-inch MacBook Pro. There are some changes, but overall, I would still consider it pretty incremental. Whereas I don't see 21.5-inch iMac to 24-inch iMac being very incremental. I see that as more of a iPhone 7 to iPhone 10 style upgrade, where it's like you're going from home button and forehead and chin to iPhone with thin bezel and gesture control and a notch. And I see it as more of like the iMac has basically from the front been unchanged for 10 years. And this is the first time they're finally going to change that. Whenever there's like a decade long design that doesn't get changed and then it finally gets rearranged and updated, that's typically when you see a price hike. That becomes more likely. Do you think the new iPad Pros will be the same price, or are they going to get more expensive with mini LED? I wouldn't assume they're going to stay the same price, although I would say both are pretty evenly likely. I'm pretty split on that one. At the same time, finding out about all the complications with the mini LED display and finding out about how they're having low yields with it and it's being problematic in mass production. Seeing that makes me think, okay, maybe they're going to up the iPad Pro to 1100 or 1200. But at the same time, if the iPad Pro still stays at 1000, I'm like, okay, that won't shock me either. So I'm pretty split on that. Like I just talked about, it's very safe to assume something's going to be more expensive if you're planning on getting mini LED iPad Pro. It wouldn't hurt to assume it's going to be 1100 instead of 1000. So I would go as far as to say, yeah, just assume it will be more expensive. That way, if it's not pleasantly surprised, you can be happy. A Tesla YouTuber solving the money problem. I used to watch him, not as much lately. Says believes in the long term Neuralink will be the biggest company in the world. It's very vague in its potential. That's the scary thing about Neuralink. Like, I enjoy talking about Neuralink because there's so many different directions it can be taken. But I think the issue with it right now is that Elon, especially when Elon gets asked about Neuralink, that there doesn't seem to be any limits. Anything someone asks him, will you one day be able to do this? You go, oh, yeah. It's because Neuralink basically means, like, can you change the brain to do whatever I can possibly imagine? And he'll just say, yeah, go ahead. Of course I can do that. Someday, you'll be able to hail a Tesla with your mind, and you'll be able to talk to people in your thoughts, and you'll be able to memorize every language in seconds, and you'll be able to speak in any country without having to learn a new language. So the limits of it are very vague and arbitrary. So if you don't apply any limitations to it, and you just assume that the rollout will go flawlessly, and you assume that the implementation of it will always work, and that you assume the public interest will be very accepting of it, which I think is the biggest bottleneck Neuralink is going to have. Not so much production issues, more so issues Neuralink is going to run into is getting government approval and getting lots and lots of people comfortable with it. I don't think is going to sneak up on you. And Elon himself has talked about how slow the development of Neuralink is probably going to be over the next few decades. So if you don't apply any bottlenecks, if you don't assume that there will be a huge number of people that resist the rollout of it, and the governments will make it difficult to roll out. The truth is, anything that is surgical is very, very difficult to roll out compared to a smartphone. It's very, very easy to demonstrate and advertise a smartphone because you can just show people, here, display, screen, you hold it, you touch it, you interact with it. I get that the latency between the brain and the touch interface is low compared to Neuralink, but it's very easy to sell. Telling people that you want to surgically implant something into their mind is not an easy sell. Even virtual reality, which isn't surgical, is difficult to sell because people can't really quite wrap their brain around how the experience is. They see a video of how it works and they try to imagine it, and Neuralink is going to be VR, exponentially harder to market. So I could see it targeting a lot of neural diseases first. Like that's what Elon and Neuralink has said. That's their primary goal, is to help people who have brain disorders, people with Alzheimer's or people with dementia or people with Parkinson's, trying to cure those diseases. And then in time, finding ways of adding benefits to Neuralink to even healthy people so that you could get one and it would make you better. But there's so many people that are going to be against it, and governments that are going to be against it and are going to fight the rollout of it, that I struggle to see it becoming the biggest company. I guess it depends on timelines we're talking about. Like, in the next 10 to 20 years, I don't think so. I could see Tesla becoming the biggest company in the next 10 to 20 years, just with the EV revolution and how much of a dominance they have there. But in regards to maybe 100 years, 200 years, it's like impossible to imagine what type of technology that's going to come in the next couple centuries. So maybe that case I could see Neuralink, but there's all kinds of competitors and stuff we don't even know about. Yeah, medical approval with implants is never easy. It's very slow. Doesn't matter how good the tech is. It's very difficult, and public is going to be very against it at first. Maybe in the next 100 years, it depends. There's so much we don't know, though. There's so many we don't know what we don't know. There's so many variables you can't account for yet, because what are Neuralink's competitors? You know, who's going to be investing more money into neurotechnology than Elon? Because he's going to be very, his time is going to be divided between Tesla and SpaceX and Neuralink. What if there's another big pioneer engineer that comes into the picture that's devoting 100% of their time to neuroscience and neurotechnologies, and they're also really rich, so they can pour more money into it, whereas Elon is kind of going to be divided between multiple different businesses and branches. So there's just a bunch of stuff we don't know, so it's hard to say. I would say don't say never. Anything is, I guess, somewhat possible. So I would say that the likelihood of Neuralink becoming the biggest company in the next 100 years is lower than that of Tesla becoming the biggest company in the next 20. I would put that percentage pretty high. Not saying either are certainties. I'm just saying if we're predicting here, I would put Tesla higher on the list than Neuralink, just because people are already, there's a car market, that exists. There's people buying cars and driving them around, and people buy newer cars with better features and good range and a lower cost of ownership. That typically drives sales. Tesla's seeing good sales, good numbers. We have evidence of, customers with vehicle. I've sat in a Tesla, whereas Neuralink is very much in the long-term distant, we don't know how that's going to age. There's not a huge market for it that we can base our market cap over it right now. Self-driving probably roll out before Neuralink. Yeah, I'd probably see that too. Anyway, I know that's fairly off subject, but it's an interesting one. I love talking about Neuralink in general, but it's not what people watch me for, I'm aware. Everyone wants to talk about Apple. Okay, when Apple refreshes the MacBook Air in 2022, do you think it will immediately replace the current M1 MacBook Air or be sold alongside it at a higher price? I don't recall a time Apple's done a redesign with the MacBook Air where they sold the older one alongside it. So I'm going to say it'll replace it. That's my guess. They'll probably, what is it? Like, wasn't there a report that said there would either be a mini LED or an OLED MacBook Air? And it would be thinner and have thinner bezels. It would kind of look like the 12-inch MacBook, but with thinner bezels. And that would be the MacBook Air. And that'll come out. You say 2022. I keep forgetting that's next year. 2022 is not that far away. We're in mid-April. We got 3 quarters. We got 9 months till 2022, which is pretty crazy. I did see the Pong demo. That was cool. I loved it. Seeing the monkey play a video game was impressive. With his mind. It's amazing. Let's see. Okay, Matthew responded to my earlier statement. He says, I'm not saying it will be cheaper than what we're expecting. I think the actual product will be a lot more disappointing than what everyone's expecting. I'm not expecting an absolute powerhouse here. Maybe a slightly better version of the M1 with 8 or 16 gigs of RAM, probably with default of the 256 gig SSD and the same 720p webcam. It's the upgrades that will cost you. I guess that's somewhat possible. I just know that Apple is well aware the base models usually sell the best. They always have higher trims, but the cheapest one, typically, especially with iMacs, a lot of people just buy the base model because they don't really know about much of those extra specs and they see how expensive they are. So I don't doubt that it will still start with a 256 gig SSD or an 8 gig of RAM or a 720p webcam. As much as that makes me sad, I still expect those things. I'm just saying the overall redesign is what's going to cost you. It's not the lower specs that are going to bring it to 1300. It's going to be the redesigned and the updated look that's going to push it to 2000, and then with upgrades that'll push it past 3000, 4000. You got to look at how expensive they price a lot of this stuff. It's usually not the first generation of something where they get real cheap. Mac Mini I think is going to be an exception, not the rule, for M1 adoption. And the MacBook Air and MacBook Pro that got the M1 didn't get redesigns, so it's pretty easy for them to keep the prices the same because they didn't have to retool much. They just, all right, throw out that fan. Yeah, keep putting in your touch bars, keep putting in your Touch ID, same keyboard as before, same displays before. 24-inch iMac is going to be lots of retooling and lots of different manufacturing methods that they haven't done before. And whenever there's redesigns like that, that's when you expect the price jump. Okay. When we think in English, our... excuse me. I don't know why I got that. Okay. When we think in English, our brain sends the same speech signals to the tongue. Whoa, 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 whoa. Interesting. Imagine if you could send a different language to the tongue and just convert to a different one. It's like instead of typing in words and phrases to Google Translate, you just have the chip and it's actively translating you as you speak. You just go, all right, switch me to Spanish mode, and then you just start speaking in Spanish. Elon would say that's possible. Although Elon says a lot of things are possible. He's just usually not great at timelines, but he is usually pretty good at accomplishing what he says he's going to do. Pretty close. You know, Model 3 did technically reach $35,000. It just didn't stay there very long. It was $35,000 for like a week, and then they took it away, and now it's $37,000. So, okay, it's not quite what he said, but pretty dang close. He said that there would be a car, 4-door sedan, with 5 seats, with a range well over 200 miles for around $35,000. That was basically achieved. Also, you got to keep in mind, Apple is seeing big success with the iPhone Mac, the Pro Max phones, which are $1,100, and it might be partially because of stimulus checks. I'm not trying to get political. I'm just telling you, there's a lot of people out there that had a spare $1,400 at the beginning of the year. So Apple's going to go, where could they put that $1,400? Or the Roadster. Yeah, Roadster's very late. Semi's very late. But I still believe they'll come out. They're just going to be not on his timeline. Should I get an iPad Pro with Magic Keyboard or iPad Air with Magic Keyboard? It would be my primary computer for a bit until I get a MacBook. I plan on editing videos and using Procreate. I guess it just comes down to your budget, Emery. iPad Pro is better. If you can comfortably afford it, I would definitely prefer the iPad. I don't like Touch ID on the iPad Air, and I don't like 60 hertz compared to 120. But if those things don't matter to you, then I guess, yeah, save yourself some money. Get an iPad Air. But also keep in mind the iPad Pro could get refreshed within like 2 weeks from now. So it might not hurt to wait just a little bit. The difficulty with the waiting game is that it could potentially be endless. You know, there were people saying, don't upgrade your iPad Pro a year ago because they were saying mini-LED was coming that fall. And if they would have listened to those creators, they'd still be waiting to this day because the iPad Pro is still not refreshed. COVID messed up the timeline. Well, yeah, COVID messed up everything. Edward says, so what do you think if they were to take the iPhone XR and turn it into an iPhone SE with 5G? I don't need the 5G part. I am very much okay with Apple still making iPhones that don't have 5G, but yeah, I know they gotta push 5G on everything. It would probably be a very good SE. It would just, I'm worried that it would sell too well. There would probably be a ton of people if we're assuming the third generation iPhone SE would still be what, like $400. If it was a 6.1-inch liquid retina display, $400, and they're even pushing the 5G argument on it, that thing's going to sell so well. It would start to honestly probably cannibalize some of the current flagships. I don't know if the squared off edge design in an OLED display would be enough to justify for people spending another $400. If they knew they could get a futuristic, modern looking iPhone for $400 that arguably is more comfortable in the hand. Yeah, that does sound like an amazing phone. I just feel like it would be too good, too amazing. They'd have to do something to screw it up. They'd have to do something to make it objectively worse. And I don't think liquid retina is a bad enough reason to upsell people another $400 to get the OLED version. Like maybe give it one camera. Don't give it 2 cameras. I guess that's what you said, 10R, right? 10R has 1 camera. So maybe that would be a good selling point, is to just say, well, iPhone 12 has ultra wide and regular lens. This one just has 1. Another one I saw floating around was to ditch Face ID. which definitely threw off some people because I was suggesting you probably wouldn't shrink the notch because that would take up too much time in manufacturing and it would complicate mass production. But you still have a notch, but there's no Face ID sensors, which sounds sacrilegious. I know you would still have a notch, but it would almost serve no purpose. And then on the power button, you would have Touch ID, like an iPad Air. So you'd have Touch ID on the side, one camera, but you would still have a 6.1-inch display with gesture control. But then I guess you have like the swipe up thing wouldn't work very well. Yeah, I don't really see them doing that. It doesn't make sense. But I'm just trying to find a way they can upgrade the iPhone SE that's better than the current generation, but not so good that it makes the iPhone 12 pointless. Because I honestly feel like what you were just describing, a 10R with 5G for $400, that would probably just sell way too well, and no one would want to buy an iPhone 12 afterwards. Ben Fine says, do you find Face ID is less reliable on iPad Pro 2018 than iPhones? I find it's not as quick, although any orientation is great. I have not experienced that. I'm trying to think. In all my times, I'll lock it and unlock it right now. No, it's very quick. It's instantaneous. It's so fast. If anything, I've run into more instances where the iPhone is slower than the iPad. The iPad works in any orientation, and I use it every day with my keyboard case, and I'm sitting pretty far away from it, and it's still able to register very quickly. So, sorry, no, I do not share that same issue. Edward says, because the current generation iPhone SE is just a cheaper iPhone 8, right? Kind of. There's a few differences. The iPhone 8 had 3D Touch. iPhone SE does not have 3D Touch. And also the iPhone SE has the A13 chip, which allows it to have portrait mode on the rear-facing camera. iPhone 8 didn't have portrait mode. So those were probably the biggest differences. But in that case, if you gave the iPhone XR like an A15 chip, oof, man, that thing would be such a killer deal. Remember, the iPhone 11 is outselling the 12 mini right now. There's still a ton of people buying the iPhone 11 just because of its price point at $600, I believe. Yeah, $600, and the screen size is good, and it's got Face ID, and it's still got an awesome camera, good battery life. It's still a really popular phone. I think it's right behind the iPhone 12 Pro. It's still selling really, really well. Let's see. If Apple does give the SE the 10R design, that may increase sales of the iPhone mini as it would become the only option for a small phone. Maybe. It could be. I don't know. I feel like the mini sale, well, yeah, that's a decent argument, I guess. There were a lot of people saying that the mini didn't sell well because everybody who liked a smaller phone bought the SE already, which I guess kind of makes sense. So, yeah, potentially. But by the time the SE gets the 10R design, I wonder if they'll still be making the mini iPhones or if they'll discontinue them, by then. Alex Lancaster says he prefers the curved design over the cut sides. I think it's more comfortable. I partly agree with you. I think the flat design of the 12 looks better aesthetically. It's very subjective. I get it. It's very personal preference based, but just the flat glass on the front, how it reaches a sharp point with the metal, and it's all flat. I feel like that doesn't catch as many lights as the 2.5D like curved glass we have on the iPhone 11. But the iPhone 11 series still feels more comfortable in my hand. I feel like it doesn't cut into the hand. So to me, the perfect middle ground would be basically iPod Touch design, where you have the flat front and then the curved back. So the front of the device has flat glass that goes right to a sharp edge, but then the back of the chassis is rounded off, which a few phones, and mainly the iPod Touch is the one that has done that. But I do think it could be more comfortable. The squared off design in its current state is a little sharp for my hand. It's not like unbearably like, oh my God, I can't hold it, but it's a little uncomfortable, just a tad. But that's why I got the 12 mini, is because it's so dang light. It's like the lightest phone Apple's made in like 6 or 7 years. So you don't really get much pressure on the corners into your hand, which I like. Just got the mini last week. Love the feel in my hand. Brings back that iPhone 4 feeling. I never used the iPhone 4. I had a few friends with them, but my first phone was the 5. But as soon as the 6 came out and I upgraded to the 6 Plus, I did prefer the curved corners. I thought it felt more comfortable. The squared off look is iconic. It's a nice look. It's aesthetically very impressive looking and very fresh and unique now to see it on the newer iPhones instead of just the older ones. But comfort to me is a bit less subjective. It's more of an objective thing. It's just, it cuts into my hand a bit. Most people wear cases anyway. Why did I not review and compare the iPad Air to the iPad Pro? I did a video on the iPad Air and I explained why I was kind of upset and kind of annoyed by the price point. I did a few comparison videos where I just weighed like the prices, and I didn't think that reviewing the iPad Air itself would result in much of a difference. I don't review things in person if I don't think reviewing them in person will give you guys any different perspective. That's like why I didn't review the HomePod Mini. Is like, I'm sure it's great. I bet it sounds awesome and the price is really fair, and I'd recommend it to people. I don't see why I need to buy one and plug it in and listen to it to tell you that. I know how I feel about it. It's the same thing with the iPad Air. It's like, yeah, I get it. All right, iPad Pro is better, but this is more affordable, I guess, so that's good for some people. I just think the iPad Air was a little too expensive. It should have either had Face ID at $600 or it should have been $500 if it was Touch ID. But they did both. They did $600 and Touch ID. And for me, that's like, it's too close, man. Too high. Too much for that device. If you're going to spend over $600 on an iPad, I'd recommend you just go for an iPad Pro anyway. They're too close together, those price points. And the iPad Pro is too much better. If Apple would announce the iPhone SE Plus, what are the chances it's going to sell better than the XR? Not high. XR looks better. XR would definitely sell better. I don't know why they would do SE Plus at this point with the XR at 500. Is that right? Sometimes I forget. I don't memorize everything, guys. Give me a break. iPhone XR. Didn't they start it at 500? Yeah, they do. Okay, 64 gigs, $499. Dang, that's a good deal. I'm surprised the iPhone XR doesn't sell that much better. For getting something with gestures and Face ID and portrait mode, and it's a good look. It's got the blue color. It's got the good looking product red instead of the product salmon pink. I guess it does have coral, which is basically salmon. But $500, I don't think there's room in the lineup for an SE Plus. I don't see it selling better. It would have to be more expensive than the SE, which is $400, but less than the XR, which is $500. Nah, I don't think it would outsell the XR. Doubt it. HomePod Mini bass sucks. Well, find a speaker that size with bass that doesn't suck. It's not what I've heard. Everybody I've heard who got the HomePod Mini's very, very impressed with it. Have you seen the Samsung's attempt at marketing their Galaxy phones to iPhone users? They created a web app that iPhone users can download and simulate the Galaxy experience. I did see that. People were talking about it on Discord. It's pretty hilarious. I don't think it's very effective because I would argue that Samsung's software is probably one of the weaker reasons to go with their phones. A good reason to go with a Samsung is usually hardware. Their displays are solid and the cameras are pretty good, and the all kinds of gimmicky features they come up with are usually the more impressive parts. The Samsung skin of Android, I don't know how many people are going to use that and think it works better than an iOS interaction, especially if you're on an iPhone already and that's what you're used to. So it's funny that they made that, yeah, but I don't see that persuading anybody. I'm sure the software has improved a lot. iOS has improved a lot. Everybody's improved. I'm just saying, if someone's already on an iPhone using iOS and then they download a web app that gives you some basic weird skin of Samsung, I doubt anybody's going to use that and be like, wow, this Samsung software is really great. I should go buy a Samsung phone. Like, I don't know anybody that would do that. Let's see. Where's the Galaxy Home Bixby barbecue speaker thing? It'll launch when AirPower launches at the same time. I could check out Open Water. I'm sure they're all just doing speculative research internally. They're not selling anything. I love the purple color on iPhone 11. I hope they keep it around. Well, the 12 didn't, so I don't know what you mean by keep it around. iPhone 11 probably stick around another year. I'd be surprised if the 10R sticks around this year, though. The light purple Thanos phone. 100 bits from Chris. What says, what is your iPhone battery health at? Mine is 91 after a year and a half. You know, my iPhone's in the other room right now. I don't actually have it on me, but I believe it's at 97. I just remember thinking it went below 100 faster than I thought it would, but it's partly because the battery's pretty small. So batteries that are smaller will degrade quicker. And also I let it die pretty often. Battery on the 12 mini is more likely to go down to 0%, whereas back in my Pro Max days, I usually ended the day around 40 or 50%. Didn't really get that low. I tried it. Not going to lie, it's nice execution, but it failed to convince me because of all the weird notifications it kept giving. I don't think that's a good business strategy. If you want someone to experience your phone, they should try the phone itself with the software and the hardware. When you try to put someone else's software on someone else's hardware, it just the experience doesn't mesh right to me. Let's see. They can the iPhone 11. I don't. They'll can the iPhone 11. Oh, okay. So you think they'll keep the 10R around? I guess that kind of makes sense because the 10R is worse. I hate that the 10R is the only iPhone with the Apple logo that's not centered. I need that consistency across the board. Come on. I went with the 12 Pro since I was scared it would be too heavy. I know many people switch from the 12 Pro Max to a 12 Pro. I just think if you're going to go with the 12 Pro, you might as well just go with a 12. It's so dang close to the same thing. You're paying so much more. 12 serves a market. I get that. If 12 mini is too small, 12 Pro Max is too big, 12 is perfect. 12 Pro is just slightly tweaked 12 for another $200. I'm like, no, thank you. With more fingerprinty sides. Did you feel any weight differences with the 11 Pro Max compared to the 12 Pro Max? Yeah, I don't know why, but the 12 Pro Max, I think it is heavier, but the 12 Pro Max felt substantially larger. I think mostly because of the squared off chassis. See, the 11 Pro Max is big, but it's rounded off. So the end points of the device are not as exaggerated, whereas, you know, how a circle occupies less area than a square fits more fully to the edges of things. The fact that the 12 Pro Max was a square right to the edge, it felt bigger. It felt like quite large, quite heavy, quite bulky. In fact, I'm so in love with my iPhone 12 mini that I'm worried that if I do get the Max iPhone this year, it'll feel too bulky and I won't like it or something. I'm worried something like that could happen, but pretty much any phone size I've gotten used to eventually. If I just toy around with it for a while, I'll just be like, it eventually becomes the norm. It just takes a little getting used to. Let's see. You think there will be an Apple Pencil 3 with these new iPads, hoping it still connects with Apple Pencil 2? I don't think so. I don't know what they could do, really. I can't think of that many reasons they should update it. The first Apple Pencil was around for 3 years. And now we've come up on 3 years with Apple Pencil 2, but they're still selling Apple Pencil 1. So, no, I don't know what they could do with the 3. Don't tell me you just want it to be cheaper. Don't need a whole new product category just for it to be affordable. Just make another one that's cheaper and better. If that's your request, just ask them to make the Apple Pencil 2 cheaper. They could do that at any time. You just make it under $100. That would be nice. But the iPads are super reliable. Still using my 2015 Pro, and performance is still good. Oh, yeah. iPads, I believe the iPad Air 2 got 7 years of software support. It's crazy. Try to imagine another tablet or another device of that quality that gets that many years of software support. It's crazy. It's amazing. More than the iPhone. The 6.1 inch is the perfect size for me. Also, I was so in love with the Pacific blue color, and the extra RAM you get on the Pro makes it worth it. I don't think the RAM makes a big difference. People just are convinced it makes a difference. Apple could have put in the same RAM on both, and people just read that the Pro had better RAM and would have been like, oh, yes, see, multitasking. This is much better. I never noticed a difference. Going from a 4 gig of RAM iPad Pro that actually does multitasking, unlike your iPhone, which doesn't do any split screen. And I never notice the app management being a thing with 4 gigs of RAM versus 6. I feel like if it did make a big difference, Apple would have talked about it on stage, and they didn't. And I guess a lot of people like the Pacific Blue, but just realize that's a very expensive color you're paying for. This is like $120 finish that you don't really notice in day-to-day. You just kind of use it after a while. 1,000 bits from Chris Norton. Jeez, that's very generous of you. Thank you. He says, my iPhone 11 Pro Max was too big and my 11 Pro is too big. That's why the mini's perfect. Get smaller. Even smaller. But thank you for the donation. Appreciate it. iPhone 10 was a weird phone now that you think about it because there's only one. They had a weird camera shape like an oval. Only one they had a weird camera shape. I mean, the 8 Plus had a weird camera shape. 10S and 10S Max had a oval shape. 10R had, well, just a regular. It's not really that weird, I guess. That's just what it looked like. Macs have longer support. Yeah, but Macs cost more. The iPad Air 2 is $500. Find me a $500 Mac with a display. Don't try to cheap out with a Mac Mini. I just mean, like, iPad is an all-in-one device. You don't need a keyboard and mouse to use it. You just take it out of the box, you charge it, you start using it. It's got your touch screen, got your home button, you got Touch ID, you got everything there for $500, and it's still getting software support 7 years later. A Mac that cost you $2,000 getting software support 8 years later is not that crazy. Byron, I saw your message. You don't have to keep spamming it. In fact, the more you spam it, the less likely I am to want to address it. Let's see. Is it possible for a device to get OS updates for too long? Windows doesn't get updates for too long. It just gets too many. The problem is there's a bunch of useless, pointless updates that don't change anything. It's updates in themselves are not bad. It's just if you have updates like 3 times a week that don't change anything, it's ridiculous. Anyway, I got to get going here, but tech video will be posted later today. I haven't started uploading it yet, but probably a couple hours from now. We'll be talking about HomePods and all the Bloomberg reports about the crazy HomePod leaks and how likely or not likely they are. But anyway, I appreciate the bits, and I appreciate you guys for subbing with the Twitch Prime. Mike gifted someone a tier 1. That was nice of him. Thank you. And appreciate you all for watching, and I will catch you all in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.